Josh Hart could be receiving a massive contract extension from the New York Knicks. All summer, we've been wondering what Josh Hart would be given by the New York Knicks in terms of a contract extension. There were a number of figures thrown out there in terms of what the Knicks could give Josh Hart. And now, thanks to Steph Bondy of the New York Daily News, we now know what the New York Knicks will likely give Josh Hart in terms of a contract extension. And like I mentioned earlier, that number is massive. We're going to break it down and so much more today. Let's get started. Josh Hart is likely receiving $75 million from the New York Knicks. This is a massive contract extension. I know we all thought it may be 70, maybe 65, maybe upwards to 80. But now we hear the figure, according to Steph Bondy of the New York Daily News, that it's upward to $75 million for Josh Hart. According to Steph Bondy, Hart will get more than he could have commanded in the open market if he opted out of his $12.9 million option for next season. The word on Hart's extension, which will be delivered in August, is in the range of 4 years, $75 million. Josh Hart is a very important player for the New York Knicks in terms of what he brings them in energy, in hustle, in those type of plays that no other Knicks does, like diving on the floor, bringing the energy to MSG when you need it. He goes coast to coast a lot too. And what he can give you in terms of another guard, another penetrator, another person who can score is important. So I understand why the New York Knicks want to retain Josh Hart. We also have to understand the chemistry he already has with Jalen Brunson, his former Villanova teammate. You can't take that away from him either, because as soon as he was added to this team, and I've said this many times before, besides KD, after the trade deadline, the New York Knicks probably acquired the most impactful player in Josh Hart, because you can't underestimate what he did for the New York Knicks once he was added. Not only that, the chemistry he had with Jalen Brunson from the start was magic. It was so good, and it basically affected the entire team and what they were doing. His energy and what he provided off the bench and what he gave the bench unit was spectacular. You could not go away from what he was giving you from the bench. There was a reason why he was closing out games besides RJ Barrett a lot of times during the regular season, because Tom Thibodeau loved what he gave you in terms of his hustle, in terms of his impactful plays, and him going coast to coast and being able to give you a player who can do that besides Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle is important. And it meant a lot that Josh Hart was rolling with that closing unit in the final moments of a game under head coach Tom Thibodeau, because he doesn't do that with a lot of players clearly. But when he does do that with you, it's important to take note of that. Honestly though, in an earlier video, even though I didn't like it, I pegged Josh Hart's value at around 76 to 78 million, that he was going to get right under the $80 million mark. And now reports are clearly indicating that he's going to get 75 million over 4 years. But if you were following this story, does this contract extension make sense for Josh Hart? In my opinion, I don't want to pay him this much amount of money. However, if you're looking at it from a Knicks perspective and you've been following the story, this absolutely makes a lot of sense. Hart was expected to command a salary of around 17 to 18 million if he opted out of his contract. But because he opted in, he allowed the Knicks access to the full mid-level tax player exception, which they used to sign his friend in Dante DiVincenzo. And now that that was the case, Josh Hart also left some money on the table as well too by opting into his deal. Because as was just mentioned, if he opted out, he could have commanded a $17 to $18 million deal. So he left roughly maybe $3 to $4 million on the table by opting into his contract with the New York Knicks, But again, like we stated, that allowed the Knicks to sign Dante DiVincenzo, one of his very good friends, Jalen Brunson's very good friend, and another former Villanova teammate. So you have to understand it from that regard. The Knicks probably feel like they have to do right by Josh Hart, given all of the sacrifices he's given and made for the Knicks in regard to his own money. So because of that, and because of the Knicks knowing that, it's likely that the Knicks are going to offer him this $75 million massive contract extension. Because if you think about it, who else on the open market right now is giving Josh Hart this much money? Who else is giving Josh Hart 4 years, $75 million right now? I don't think another team in the NBA would give Josh Hart this much money. Maybe close, but not this much. And I feel like the Knicks giving Josh Hart this much money is basically saying a thank you to Josh Hart. Thank you for taking less money initially. Thank you for allowing us to sign Dante DiVincenzo, who you wanted us to sign anyways. But still, thank you for signing him. And as a reward for your play, what you mean to this team, the chemistry that you add to this team, and for what you did and allowed us to do here, what we're going to do is we're going to give you a $75 million contract in August. And that's what we're going to do for you, get you paid and make you feel wanted by this New York Knicks team and give you a home. And I'm sure that's what Josh Hart believes. I'm sure that's what the New York Knicks believe. And that's why I'm very sure that this massive contract extension of $75 million over 4 years for Josh Hart will absolutely happen and come true. But a lot of fans are asking me, is this contract extension worth it for Josh Hart, given where we are right now, given the new CBA, given those rules, and a player like Josh Hart in a few years, is he going to be worth this amount of money? Here's what I can say about that. I don't think the contract is a gross overpay. If you give Josh Hart $75 million over 4 years, is it too much money still for me? Yes, I still think it's too much money. But if you're looking at contracts already given out during the league this offseason, or you're looking at contracts that already exist, and if you look at the CBA moving forward with a deal like Josh Hart, is it going to be more valuable or less valuable moving into the future? In my opinion, it's going to be more valuable given Josh Hart's age and his type of game and play style. The league and NBA teams will always need a player like Josh Hart. As long as that's the case, Josh Hart's contract and his type of player is always going to have value in this league. So I don't think the Knicks are going to have any issue in the future if they want to move Josh Hart away from this contract. Because again, it's not a gross overpay, but it's a little too much money in my opinion. But a lot of people have been wondering, what is the main reason the Knicks are giving Josh Hart this contract? And a lot of people may think it's the chemistry that leads Josh Hart getting this contract from the New York Knicks, or Jalen Brunson pushing for that. But in my opinion, the reason that the Knicks are offering Josh Hart this much money is due to his defense. If you take a look here, a lot of reports indicate that Josh Hart, even though he had a lot of offensive prowess, he also excelled defensively. He recorded a career-high defensive rating of 116 last season, which is expected to decrease as the Knicks rely on him for critical defensive plays. During the playoffs, Hart had a defensive rating of 110.2 and averaged 5.7 defensive rebounds. That's the reason Josh Hart's getting the deal. That's why Josh Hart's getting the contract. There you go. Question answered. Tom Thibodeau, more than anything else, is known as a defensive coach. Whether you feel his defense is good in the modern NBA or not, as you've seen Josh Hart's game evolve, now you can see that not only is he a very, very good defender, but he's an extraordinary rebounder for his size. And I can also say the defense that he played on Donovan Mitchell and other key guards on the Cavs during the playoffs were one of the main reasons we won that series against the Cavs. Do not take anything away from what Josh Hart gives you. If you're asking me, do I want to retain Josh Hart on the Knicks? Absolutely. This was never the question. Josh Hart is a perfect fit for the New York Knicks, perfect for what they do, and I think his game complements the Knicks, their style of play, and definitely their coach. Josh Hart is a defensive monster when it comes to certain players he plays against, like Donovan Mitchell, like Jimmy Butler, although he didn't do a great job against Jimmy during the Miami Heat series when they played him in the playoffs. You don't really have to look hard or look far to find reasons to why the New York Knicks would offer Josh Hart this amount of money. You can find them, they're easy. But if you're asking me, is Josh Hart worth this amount of money for the New York Knicks? In my opinion, my final thoughts on that are no. I wouldn't have paid him this much if I could control it. It doesn't mean it's a bad contract. It just means it's a contract that I wouldn't offer him personally. But am I glad that the Knicks can retain a player like Josh Hart, given his fit, his contributions, and what he can do? Absolutely. I think it's very important to retain players like this, especially players who love to play for the Knicks, and a player like Josh Hart who is openly recruiting other type of stars, role players, or any other type of players to the Knicks. You don't have those type of players on the Knicks often, and you can't pay a player to do that. But Josh Hart, you don't need to pay him to do these things. He loves where he is. He loves his teammates. You can clearly see that. But he loves his situation. And because of that, he's going to race and rush to social media to tell everybody in the world why he loves the fans, why he loves his teammates, and why he loves the Knicks. And that's going to spread all across the league. And hopefully that influences some other players and their thoughts and feelings about coming to New York and what that could mean for them and their career. I'm not saying Josh Hart and signing him to a deal is a bad thing, but signing Josh Hart to a $75 million contract over 4 years, while not an overpay, is still a massive contract extension for Josh Hart. If you like this video, go ahead and leave a comment below, smash that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Until next time, Knicks fans. Peace.